Hello, my gorgeous people. It is Grace here, Bicadonia, and I am here with the little KLX230. It's a 2022. I bought it about 6 months ago, and I thought it's probably time for a bit of a performance review. Alright, so when I first got this bike, the thing that was driving me nuts was the high variable idle. So Kawasaki seemed to have decided that they were going to make this bike really friendly for beginner riders. They were going to make a variable idle that was going to idle so high that you couldn't stall the bike. Now, think about going down a really steep hill in the jungle and having a really high idle that's so high that instead of getting engine braking, you're getting acceleration. This, my friends, is terrifying and not what I want. So, since I know how to use a clutch and I do not need the assistance of the variable idle, what I did is I swapped out the automatic idle unit for a manual idle adjustment screw. Now, this is a very small little piece of machined metal. It's made here in Thailand and it solves your problem. So here we have my manual idle adjustment screw. That's it in there. See that little red bit of machined metal? This will solve all of your problems. You just screw it into the same socket that the automatic idle adjustment unit goes into. It's two little screws, and then you are good to go. Here is a comparison of the stock part and the manual idle adjustment screw that you're replacing it with. Now, when you do install this unit, what you want to do is you want to remove the automatic idle adjustment unit, take that out, but you'll see that it's actually plugged into a sensor. Now, you don't want to unplug that sensor because then you'll get a check engine light. So what you want to do is you want to seal up that automatic idle adjustment unit with the sensor still plugged into it. Seal it up in plastic so it doesn't get all wet and all dirty, and then just tuck it up there underneath the fuel tank. And this will mean that you do not get a check engine light and everything in your life will be good. Okay, so that's the story of the idle adjustments. Like I say, get the little manual idle adjustment screw. It's this big, it solves all your problems, and then you won't die while going down a hill. Now, let's talk about performance. As you can see, we have some really high-tech suspension going on the front of the bike. We don't even have upside-down forks. Now, it's pretty soft. I am about 58, 59 kilograms, and I managed to bottom out these front forks really easily. Fanging along, just hit a pothole really hard, and you'll bottom out your front forks. It hasn't really caused me any problems because I mostly use this bike for more technical trail riding. So I'm not hitting most stuff at speed. And so it doesn't really bother me. But if you were hitting a lot of stuff at speed, if you want to be fanging along the trails at more than 60 kilometers an hour a lot of the time, I think you might notice that you're bottoming out a lot. Now, rear suspension, again, nothing high tech there, but like I say, it's pretty soft. And on the off road, I have no complaints about it. For what it is, for the amount of money you pay for this bike, you really cannot complain. Overall, I find this bike incredibly capable off road. It's just a light, nimble little bike. This is the standard dual sport edition, but it's not the low seat height one. It's the standard seat height. And I'm about 165 centimeters tall, so let me show you how tall this bike is for me. So yeah, for someone 165 centimeters tall, I think it's really the right height because I'm getting as much ground clearance as I can, while at the same time I'm not teetering in space. Like you can see, I can get both toes down at the same time, And if I'm sitting one side or the other, I can flat foot one side at a time and feel really comfortable, really confident. And the other thing is the bike's not heavy and it's not top heavy either. So again, even regardless of the height of the bike or the height of you, it's a really manageable little machine. I also ride the Gas EC300 on the trails here. I spend a lot of time falling from height because it's a tall bike and it is slightly more top heavy than this bike. So this one I can really put a foot down and feel really comfortable and really confident, which is really nice. It means I spend a lot less time lying in the mud. Of course, power. And when I talk about the EC300 and talk about riding the KLX230, this is obviously the thing that comes to mind first. Now, the KLX230, it's not a beast. So I'm running a 52 tooth rear sprocket to really gear it down for the slow off-road stuff. I find that in terms of speed, I'm probably topping out at about 70 kilometers an hour comfortably. But that doesn't bother me because of the kind of riding I do. Obviously, change your gearing ratio, you're going to get a higher top speed. But, you know, power, this bike doesn't have a huge amount of it, but the power to weight ratio I think is fine. On the steep hill climbs, that sort of thing, I really don't notice myself running out of power if I'm in first or second gear. If you're in third gear, you're trying to do a really steep hill climb, you're trying to switch up from second to third, you really want to keep up your momentum, then you're going to notice that there's not a lot of power to be had on this bike. That's the kind of thing that you want the EC300 for. But if you're happy to tractor up the hill in second or in first even, this bike, it just tractors. It's a great little machine. Now, what would I recommend this bike for? I would totally recommend this bike for beginners. Like I say, fix that high idle issue. It's horrible. It does not help you ride the bike. It does not help beginners. It does not help anybody. Fix the high idle issue and then strip off a bit of weight. So the other thing that I've done on this bike is I've stripped off the headlight assembly, the instrument console, because they're really heavy. So the headlight assembly I've replaced with a made in China KTM copy. It's really, really light, LED, brighter than the one I had before, and weighs basically nothing. The exhaust, we've got a Pro Circuit exhaust, which weighs kilograms less than the stock exhaust. I've pulled off the rear foot pegs. This has a downside because it kind of leaves your rear brake line swinging in the wind unprotected. I have broken my rear brake line one time already and I now carry a spare because of that problem. I would love it if someone would make a bracket that actually protects not only the reservoir but the rear brake line. But there you go. So I don't have any indicators, any mirrors, or any number plate at this point. So that certainly contributes to making it a really light bike and may or may not be suitable in your jurisdiction. Having stripped all that weight off though, I say this is a brilliant bike for beginners, for people of smaller stature who really want to be able to feel confident as they build up their off-road ability. If you're not going really, really hard, like I say, you're not doing those hill climbs and trying to do them from second into third, then you're not going to run out of power. If you want to ride on the highway, you are going to run out of power and you're going to run out of speed and it's going to drive you nuts. This bike is honestly, they call it a dual sport, but you want to be, if you're going to be dual sporting anywhere, you want to be on the back roads. Good value for money, a lot of fun, approachable, easy, and it'll take a lot of punishment. Now, the only other problem I had was I burnt out the clutch in 220 kilometers on this bike. Now, this is uncharacteristic for me. I'm generally very, very gentle on my clutches. I got 90,000 kilometers out of the clutch on my KTM. So I don't think it's me just riding the bike badly. I think there's a bit of an underlying issue there. I've been talking to other friends who've got KLXs, and they've also said they had some initial problems with the clutch. Like me, they've upgraded the clutch springs to make it a heavier clutch spring, and so far so good. I've now gotten about 1,000 kilometers out of this clutch, and I've not had any problems, even though I've been riding the same off-road, pretty challenging terrain. Another thing to note is, of course, if you want to do a lot of off-road, you may be inclined to go for the R version, which is a completely different animal to the dual sport version. I mean, you look at the service manual and you can see that your service intervals are measured in hours, whereas this one, the service interval is 12,000 kilometers, which is crazy. I obviously service about every few hundred kilometers because of the kind of riding I'm doing here. But I could obviously get away with much, much longer service intervals. The reason I have the dual sport version of this bike, even though I ride mostly off-road, is because I wanted to get papers for it. Here in Thailand, you cannot get papers for the R version. Now, the R version as well, it has more horsepower, it has more ground clearance, it has better suspension, it's got a bunch of different stuff going on. It's not the same bike, so maybe less beginner friendly, definitely less short person friendly, but undoubtedly the bike that I would rather be riding right now if I didn't have to have papers. So pick your weapon, choose your priorities, and enjoy your ride.